It's 10 o'clock, so let's go. I don't have our designated yeller here, Ed. First of all, we got a couple members. Bruce Murphy, stand up and say hi. Hi. Or sit down and say hi. Thank you. He just joined us today, and Gina's Brady.
I'll stand up.
You can stand up. Hi, it's like the old Rotary Club. Everybody goes, hi, Janice. And Bruce Yoder joined last month, and this is his second meeting. Today's speaker is going to join us in a few moments via Zoom. Coming up, a couple meetings. April 10th meeting at the Libby Mill Library. A couple months ago, I showed some pictures that Chuck had taken of Ku Klux Klan exhibit, if you remember, out of the VMFA. And we got a discussion going about should he have taken that, should he not have taken that, and so forth. And I thought maybe for a future program, maybe next month, it might be interesting if we sent in photographs where we asked ourselves, should I have taken that or not? Everybody's got one. They don't have to be of people. They're generally of people, infringing on somebody's privacy. Don't have to be. But if you've got some shots where you asked yourself later, did I overstep the bounds? Should I have taken this picture or not? Could you send them in to Sue, who is the program chair? And we will put together at least a few things that might spark some conversation about what's, because our speaker is also going to be talking about copyright issues. So it might tie in with that. The May 8th meeting is going to be across the river. We're going to Chesterfield, finally. Meadowdale Library, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And last meeting, I brought up the idea of working with some other groups, like writers associations and so forth. I tried to get in touch with some people and never got a response from anybody. Maybe we're in the age where if you send somebody an email and they don't know exactly who you are, they think they're being scammed. Is that? So I don't know where to go from there other than I'll try it again. But if anybody has any ideas of groups you belong to that might use some photography help, let me know. Because the idea seemed to resonate and it seemed like people were interested. But if we can't get people on the other side to respond, I don't know what we do. Anyway, let me know if you have some ideas on your own. If you noticed in the last newsletter, and thanks MJ for another great newsletter, Sue had some questions, help wanted from you. And again, send these to Sue. What do you want to learn or review? And review is a key word, because we all think we know everything there is to know about photography, but that's not true. Sometimes we need to review things. What workshops would you like to see? We had a workshop a couple of years ago, and we broke down into groups of 3 or 4 people, each talking about a particular photographs they had taken and discussion and so forth. That seemed to work really well. Maybe we'll try that again. Who would you like as guest speakers? If you've got any ideas, let us know. And what quick tips or skills would you like to share? Harold, I know you do drone photography. Most of us don't, but I'd love to learn how to do it. Coming up, March 24th and 25th and 26th, if you have any interest, there's going to be a giant GalaxyCon convention at the convention center in the city. This is where people dress up as Trekkies and other assorted characters. And they have this 3-day event, and they have people like William Shatner, Captain Kirk is going to be here, and so forth. My granddaughter is going, and she says, you don't have to pay the $50 entry fee, because if you just stand outside before the gates open, there will be lines of people dressed up in very strange, weird outfits. If you're interested. If you're interested, it's Friday, March 24th from 2 to 8, and the next day, Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Just go down there and see if you can get pictures of very strange looking people. Has our speaker joined us?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, we're gonna have to wing it then, aren't we?
Well, we can do our photo share first.
Let's do photo share first.
Well, is any of the other people?
Tom, you, nothing. Ray said he had. Nothing,
Yeah,
nothing.
Two new members that we're happy about that you've already mentioned.
Yep. MJ,
Just the usual thing. I'm particularly interested in getting best shot photos for the newsletter I'm working on now. So please, if you've got anything, send it. We're doing fairly well in other departments. But the best shot, I really need that. So please send something.
okay,
Can you maybe explain best shot? So
That shot can be any subject. It's just something that you really like and you'd like to share with the rest of the group. All I need is, and I don't care what your resolution is, I can deal with that. A title and the metadata if it's not embedded.
maybe we should retitle it and say favorite shot. Best shot implies competition or something, but maybe favorite shot. I mean, we all have favorite shots. Show off.
Peter, sorry, I'm a little behind in taking notes. What was the name of the science fiction show that your granddaughter recommended?
It's galaxy.com. If you want more information, just go to that website, galaxy.com.
Okay.
And it has, this is a big deal in the world of Trekkies and science fiction and so forth. And there will be apparently hundreds of people here, including some very big names, as I mentioned, Captain Kirk. And I think I'm gonna go down because I wanted, I mean, my granddaughter's still working on her costume. So obviously, people put a lot of time and effort into this. And Lord knows why. What is my costume?
what's your costume?
I have a T-shirt that a friend of mine at church made me, and it's a picture of a camera, and it says, "Watch out, I shoot." So I'll wear that. Okay, let's do photo share until Rocco was able to join us.
Okay. And
I think that's me. I had been wanting to actually do some self-portraits. I was trying to figure out the best way to set up to do it, since I couldn't be behind the camera at the same time. So I actually used my focus stacking setup. I could set it to take like 5 shots, and then try to go get in front of the camera for it. and see how they came out and then try it again. So this was one that I kind of liked.
Very professional.
That was with just one off-camera strobe through an umbrella. And let's see, how do
That's that won't work today.
then I did it in black and white. I kind of like the black and white version myself. Just to see how that came about. So then I decided to change outfits. And I took this one. My wife preferred this one. She liked this one better. And so then I tried playing around with editing. If this was in Topaz Studio, one of the effects that they had, which I thought was pretty cool. And the next one was a little bit different. I thought that was kind of a fun thing to do, playing around with it. And then I took one that was a little bit more me with my camera. So I was playing around, just trying to do headshots by myself, and that was a fun thing to do.
Did your wife urge you to smile?
Hmm?
Did your wife tell you to smile?
No, he wasn't there. He had gone out somewhere, and I set up to do this while I was there.
It looks like there should be an author on the back of a book jacket.
Yeah.
They're really classic.
Okay, last Sunday, I went out to Powhatan State Park. A friend of mine has shown me where to find good wildflowers this time of year. And these are spring beauties. This is one of the first very small little flowers to pop up. And I used my some focus stacking equipment I had on my camera to be able to get a lot more detail in the shots. I was very happy with the way they came out. It was fortunately a calm day. I tried this last year, but the days I went out there were kind of breezy, and it's really hard to get good focus stacking if you have any movement at all. But these came out pretty well. These are spring beauties. And the next one is also spring beauties. They're pretty cool flowers. These are bloodwort or bloodroot, or bloodroot. And that's another bloodroot out there. This is called cutleaf, I believe. And that is called lungwort, which I don't know the names. When I went out there with her, she knows the names of all of these flowers, but I looked them up online in an app called Picture This, and it tells me what they are.
And that's,
Yeah, Tom, for your photo stacking, are you using a tripod?
Yes.
Okay.
So those were all at the County State Park?
Pardon?
Those were all at the state park?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, this is me. These are not my pictures, but I save you the awful duty of looking at pictures of me. Self-portraits. Nobody needs that. These are pictures that I found a stack of in the alley in DC when I lived up there in the mid-80s. I know nothing about where they're from, who took them. It was evidently a pro photographer, but other than that, I think the pictures are mostly from the 60s. Just a guess. You tell me, okay? I don't know. She really likes telephones. That's why I think it's from the 60s. I think she really likes American best. Okay. I have no explanation of this.
they can't be explained.
No, it can't. Nor do, I don't know Slim Whitman and God knows who else.
I didn't know Hoss Cartwright was in Dr. Chicago, but evidently was. He really likes those dimples. This looks like it should be captioned in the newspaper just before being cut down in a hail of gunfire. I love the way she's shooting daggers at the young woman there. I don't know what the story is, but there is one. Remember when girls used to iron their hair? When was that? Yeah, okay. Training people in the 60s. Okay. They both have the same glasses. It's Clark Kent's on there.
Don't laugh too hard, we all used to look like that.
That's right. We all lived through the 60s. We were like that. That was the best. You could have that close prototype of Princess Leia. And of course, you gotta have the band, but it makes your eyes hurt in black and white. I can only imagine in color.
So you found a stack of pictures, you say?
Yeah, that's just a part of the whole. They're all like that, huh? Incredibly strange.
In an alley or something?
In and out, yeah. Yeah. Oh, you can't throw these away either. I can't let this go to the landfill.
That makes me question, why were you looking at the garbage?
But you never know what you're gonna find.
It was the sixties.
It was the 80s.
That's it. That's good.
Fine. It's the first tab. Or,
This one,
yeah. So I was visiting, that's my brother. He lives in central Pennsylvania, Amish country. And that's where I grew up also. So we came across this covered bridge around driving around. And I asked him for some info on it. The next one's the bridge as well. And so this was damaged by Hurricane Agnes, I think it was 73 or so. And it wasn't restored until, you know, it took several decades anyway. But when he was getting the information on it, he said, you might point out that he and his buddies, when they were underage, would go there to drink after the bridge came down because they could only have to look for the cops coming from one direction and they could see them very far away. And so we wanted you to add that bit of culture with it. Okay. The storage strings display at BMFA, I don't know if any of you got to see that, it's almost finished. But I found it fascinating. It was and you can just kind of step through these next couple. There you got a Telecaster and Explorer. There's a Guild with the Guild amp, or a Gretsch, I mean. And we were having fun with the elevator. At the museum, it's reflective, and that's my self-portrait. Little shop on Harris Street.
I really like your guitar shots in the museum. You really got some nice angles on those.
I played guitar. It was very envious, so I was walking around.
I was gonna ask if you wanted.
Yeah.
Like you told us, I know, like you did by looking at your
Sausage things. Oh, I'd like to pick that up.
I would like to get in on the song.
I've gone through the tour of the Martin factory in Pennsylvania with the Martin stars, and that was really fascinating. I've done that a couple of times. You just walk in, to the room afterwards and pick up a $15,000 guitar. Look at that one. Wow, what a place to do that.
Paul, who was the singer who used to smash his guitars?
Um,
Somebody from the-
Johnson would do that, yeah, from the Who.
So, I mean, is he smashing $15,000 electric guitars?
The equivalent thereof at that time, I mean, maybe not like that, but today, a nice Les Paul would be like $3,500, and that's what they're playing, is fraction of. I think the guy from Foo Fighters would do that sometimes too. They will.
For some of them, though, that's like $5 to us.
Yeah, it's got a garage full of them, bring it in the room.
Frank?
Right.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you?
Yes.
I'm actually in the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital. I'm my wife's driver today and had to drop her off for an appointment. Anyway, this is one of the photos I've created for a series I call Richmond on the James, and the title of this particular piece is Fall Line of the James. It's a photograph that's been rendered to look like a pen and ink or a pencil drawing. And this is my submittal for the humorous category. I was on the streets of Edinburgh several years ago, a rainy summer day, and I looked across the street and I saw this gated school, and they had posted 2 warning signs there on the gates, and I could see that one sign was already being ignored. So I decided to ignore the other sign. And that's it for me anyway.
Okay, this one is one of mine. This is my self-portrait. This is at Colonial Downs, and the guy's the TV photographer for the big screen. And that's me taking his picture. As he's taking mine. This is from a recent trip down to the Rolex 24. These are a few shots from down there. It's in the pits. This is when it's starting to get evening, and the headlights are coming on, and darkness is falling in. This is about 5 o'clock in the morning. The next.
What type of cars are these? What category of racing?
These are prototypes here. They race 5 different classes at the same time. And that's why you see in the other one, that, a 200-mile-an-hour prototype beside a 180-mile-an-hour Corvette. So they get going down the straights, and there's a big difference in the speed. And the handling, of course, the prototypes handle a whole lot better than the sports cars do too. But there's a lot of Porsches and Mercedes, and then these that are whatever custom made. That's a portion of pits in the middle of the night. And then as the morning started coming in, this is at 7 a.m. That's a reflection of the sunrise over Lake Lloyd there. This is at Daytona Speedway. And the Ferris wheel that they have out there. And to give you an idea, this is the inside of the track where they're racing through the inner part, and then there's cars up here racing on the high banks at the same time. They'll come around, but there's a mixture of the sports cars and the prototypes all together. That's Nancy's.
That's me. I've been doing some abstract architectural detail. I hope to put together a series. That would be 6, but I'll probably not finish. That I don't wanna make it all grainy like that, windy and grainy.
Where are you shooting these things?
One was a building on Carriage Street, one was a building, you know, a piece of architecture, a building downtown. You know, it's just a little tiny piece. This was a much bigger thing. It was a whole round, arch kind of thing. I just dropped it down to get the abstract of it. And I've been playing around with some old pictures because I haven't been out much. These are from 2016 in Iceland. I think there's another one like this. I don't know which I like better. I don't know which anybody would like better. I think maybe if there's one more, Ken, this, yeah. Be curious if anybody thinks one is better than the other in cropping or treatment. This one?
Yes, I like the first one, but they're close.
Gives you a sense of the place.
Yeah, that's pretty much how that's uncropped, that's pretty much how I got it. I was thinking the white flowers in the foreground. Computer, I started cropping and painting. Right, interesting. This is my son Dan. We met them in Iceland, and typical, he'd be sitting and studying something and not looking at the pictures, but looking at his computer. So I thought it was nice for him. And Iceland. That's not me.
That's Paul again, that's when he emailed me.
It's the, they never took out more pictures on any trip in Iceland. You can't go wrong.
That's mine. I went down into the city on a foggy morning. And that is fog. That is not snow, it's not anything other than, that's what it looked like. And I called him exactly right. There was no post-processing, nothing. It's just a foggy morning. So if you get a chance to go out early and go down by the river, a foggy day, it's nice stuff. That one is, that's the bridge, obviously, bridge to nowhere. Again, on no touching, retouching at all. Sitting with that, this guy's coming out of nowhere. This is the self-portrait assignment that we had playing in Photoshop. It's a great thing to play with. We went out a couple weeks ago down to 4th Street Bridge, and an evening getting moving cars going through. That's one way. And a question: do geese mate for life?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, then this is mom and dad together with a nice reflection. This, I have no idea what I did with this. This was a nighttime shot. And it's something in Photoshop, and I don't know what. But reversed, it's sepia, or did something or other. It looks like an old-fashioned photograph. But I wish I had taken notes. Because I don't know. This is a granddaughter's lacrosse game, and again, why are those lights reflected up there? It's not UFOs. It's what happened. Can anybody tell?
It's the field lights.
It's a reflection of the.
All the field lights.
Oh,
Right
it's
there in the
not,
sky.
it's the one, is it a reflection?
It's a reflection of those bands. Do you have a UV filter or something on? And I guess it's just reflecting off different layers of the glass within the lens.
I guess so. Couldn't figure it out. I was hoping somebody would have.
It's aliens.
Yeah, that was my first one.
Well, the way you're situated over the bright lights and then field lights. I would venture to guess that they're reflections of the lights.
Yeah.
That are that. That's my thought, is they're reflecting actually probably off the clouds or the atmosphere, because it's showing the individual lights.
Yes.
Yeah.
The lights look like a big bright bulb, but they're not. I think they're the same as what's up.
Yeah, he technically says they're the same angle.
So that was supposed to, that was just with an item. Maybe that.
And that's it.
We need more photo share. Send your photographs in. Is our guest here?
Hello.
Oh,
Yes, there he is.
There he is. Okay.
Nice. Sorry, I'm running a little late this morning. Court, what should have taken 5 minutes took an hour. So, which is not uncommon.
Just let me introduce him. Rocco Columbus. When he was born, people told his parents with a name like Rocco, he was destined to be a lawyer. And when he was 11 years old, he corrected a Little League baseball umpire who incorrectly applied a rule, citing a specific rule and paragraph in the rule book. Rocco had fulfilled his destiny. Since 1987, Rocco has lived in Virginia, most of his time in the Hampton Roads area after graduating from William and Mary. In 2002, he attended law school at the University of Richmond, graduating in 2006. His focus has been criminal, civil, and traffic cases. He's handled everything from misdemeanors to serious violent felonies. He is admitted to practice in both the state and federal courts. And although he was born in Pittsburgh, and so naturally he remains a Steelers fan. Rocco, take it away.
All right. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so as I said, I'm Rocco Columbus. I'm an attorney with Randall, Page, and Bruck. Thank you guys for letting me appear over Zoom. Unfortunately, I have court obligations that are in places other than Richmond today. So I couldn't make it up there. It's a shame. I was there last Monday, which would have been perfect, but alas, things don't work out. So I'm here wanted to talk to you guys and let's talk about some copyright laws and how with your photos, sharing your photos can be an issue. Now I have a slideshow, so I'm going to be sharing my screen here in just a minute. So we're going to get started here. Let's see. Hopefully technology cooperates today. All right, there we go. Okay, protecting your materials. So this first shot, since it's a photography club, I wanted to start with a photo. It's a photo my boss took of somebody who went to court in Greensville County and drove his tractor to court. I'm sharing it I thought it was a very good photo. He posted it on Facebook. Then I turned around and posted it on my Twitter account without saying, oh yeah, my boss took it. So that's what we're going to be using to refer back to on some of the examples today when I talk about taking somebody's photo and property and whatnot. But we're just glad the gentleman came to court. However you get there, it works for us. So for the most part, most of what you're dealing with in copyright law is federal law. There's very little state court involvement. The differences, there are a lot of differences. One of the biggest ones is that there aren't as many lawyers that are practicing in federal court. They mentioned I'm in the Eastern District of Virginia. In the Eastern District of Virginia, there are 4 courthouses: Norfolk, Newport News, Fairfax, and Richmond. So since you guys are in the Richmond area, most of your stuff would go there. But however, Charlottesville is in the Western District. I can't remember exactly where the dividing line falls. So some of you who are kind of on the western part of Richmond, or you may actually be in the Western District, so you would need to find an attorney admitted there. Whereas with state court, every city, every county has that one big building where anybody who's a lawyer in Virginia can be admitted to or can practice. For federal court, you have to be admitted to both to your state and the federal court, and not every attorney is able to do that. Also, when you're dealing with copyrights, you're dealing with trademarks, these are very specialized subjects. I don't specialize in copyright law. I have some understanding of it. But before you do anything serious, you're going to want to talk to a lawyer who does this for a living. A friend of mine that I use, his name is Josh Brady. He's a lawyer in Northern Virginia, and he started with the Department of Justice for copyright law, and he's been doing this for 17 years now. There are attorneys in the Richmond area, but you want to make sure if you're going to be going into court, you're going to be suing, that the guy you have does this regularly. I just wanted to start with a brief primer of terms, because a lot of these words will be used interchangeably, and I do it too, but they do mean different things. And so we kind of have to be careful about what we're talking about. So for copyright, it protects works, basically something you produce, like a book, a song, anything like that falls under copyright laws. Then there's trademarks. So your names, your ideas, logos, like the McDonald's arches, the NBC chime. We all know that ding, ding, ding. That's trademarked. During the 1950s, Japanese motorcycle companies were trying to make their engines sound like Harley Davidson engines. Because I'm not a motorcycle guy, but you hear a Harley, you recognize it. And Harley actually tried to trademark their engine sound. I think ultimately they were not successful, but that's kind of an idea, something you trademark. Intellectual property is a creation or an invention or an innovation. And honestly, the best explanation for intellectual property is the first time I ever heard the term used was when David Letterman was leaving NBC for CBS, and NBC tried to threaten to sue him if he used any of his gags that he used on Late Night with David Letterman. He took them to CBS, claiming that they were NBC's intellectual property. I'd never heard that term before, but in all the years, that's the best definition I've ever heard of it, is the stuff David Letterman did on his shows, intellectual property. I believe they actually worked out a settlement, and he was able to take some of his things with him. And I didn't put this on here, but there's also patents. That usually applies to, physical things like, staplers and things like that. Those are patented. So you're going to hear and see a lot of these words used differently, but they all have very distinct meanings in court and in the law. Oh, there we go. Brief history. Not going to go deep into the weeds on this. It all dates back to Britain. So if you hate copyrights, if you hate things that are protected, you can blame the English. It is, one of our greatest pastimes. The first copyright law was the 1709 Statute of Anne that granted legal protection to book publishers. So that's what kicked it off. This is actually an enumerated right in the United States Constitution, which gives Congress the power to grant copyrights. So that's why almost all of this is federal law. It precludes most state issues. States, there's very limited areas where they can jump in because of this specific grant. The first copyright law, 1790, you had 14 years from when the work was created, and then another 14 years. And this law has been added to over the years. In 1995, the most recent extension was done. It's known unofficially as the Mickey Mouse Act, because around that time, the copyright protections on Mickey Mouse were set to expire. And as you might imagine, Disney did not feel like they wanted their product into the public domain. So they followed the American pastime of handing bags of cash to congressmen, got this law extended. So it's now 120 years or the life of the author plus 70 years. What's interesting is, I believe in January, I don't know if anyone else saw this, all of the works of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle have now hit public domain because the last one that he published is finally out of this window. So they're all available. I believe Mickey Mouse is actually going to be out of this window, I believe, in the next 2 years. I have to look exactly, but there's some things that Disney's lawyers, who are paid very well, will do to, keep you from using it without getting sued. But that's going to be interesting to see what happens with copyright law in the next couple of years. The current law, when it was passed in 1995, just a little piece of trivia, it was named after an obscure California politician. He was a former mayor. His name was Sonny Bono. Just in case, some of you might have heard of him. He's a little before my time. All right, so now to the fun stuff. How do you make a copyright? You make something and you have a copyright. There is no fancy process that you necessarily have to do. You don't have to get it blessed by anybody. If you take a picture, you have a copyright on that picture. Do you have to file anything? No, you don't have to file things. There are things you can file, but all those really do are confirm what you already know, that you create this. This photo belongs to you. Nobody else has any rights over it. And if you want, you can put the little copyright symbol on it that says it belongs to you. And if anybody else takes it from you, it's stealing. So how do you make a copyright? Take a picture. That picture has a copyright. What you can do is register your copyrights with the federal government, with the Copyright Registration Office. You don't have to do it. What it does is it makes lawsuits a lot easier, because you don't have to establish that you've created this work. You've already done it. You can just point to your registration number, and it allows for what are called statutory damages, basically, which fancy term. Normally, in a case, you have to prove how much you were hurt. If it's statutory damages, then by law, you get a set amount of money if you prove that you've been harmed or that they took your copyright. It does cost money. I believe it costs on the low end $40, depending on what you're registering and how much. It can cost up to $500. So, as you can see, if you're registering a couple photos or a couple albums, it's not really that expensive. It's a good idea. If you're individually registering every photo you take, for some of you that are prolific, this can be prohibitively expensive to do so. So you kind of have to discuss, comes down to a cost-benefit analysis. What kind of business are you running? Are you running a business? Are you doing this for fun? Are you in a situation where people are taking your photographs and you need this additional protection? So you kind of have to balance that. Generally, you don't have to go through the registration, but in your specific instance, it might be necessary. So some copyright exceptions. And this is something that people say a lot, including my father, which is why I did this talk in the first place with his camera club. I posted it on Facebook. Do I still own it? The answer is yes, 100% yes. Don't believe the scams that go across on Facebook. You still own it. Just because you make it available so that other people can see it doesn't destroy copyright. Otherwise, you would be discouraged from ever making anything visible to anybody, without paying exorbitant fees, and it would defeat the purpose of creativity. So that doesn't change anything about whether you still own it. You may say, oh, well, it's public domain. Not really. So putting something out visible into the public is not public domain. that generally public domain, it's something that's abandoned, meaning its creator no longer exists or no longer takes efforts to protect it, or its copyright protections have expired. Now, abandoned public domain is, a week-long part of an intellectual property course, so we're not going to get too deep into that. Just know that when the NFL threatens to sue churches who use the term Super Bowl party, it's because they're protecting they have a trademark on the term Super Bowl, and if they aren't aggressive with it, they could lose that trademark. So that's why they do it. It's the same reason why Xerox fought tooth and nail to keep from the term Xerox being common use, and they failed. So public domain, again, if you post a photo on Facebook and your underling takes it and posts it on Twitter and claims it his own, like I did to my boss, he could sue me. Now, his big problem is proving damages. It's not a registered photo, and likes on Twitter make me feel good. They're a dopamine hit, but they aren't currency. So he wouldn't really make any money off of it. The next exception is fair use. You hear this term a lot. Now, again, fair use is another thing that takes up a week in IP law class. So we aren't going to get deep into it. There's a 4-prong test. If you ever spend any time in courts, they love their tests. They love their prongs. All you really need to know about fair use, if you're making money off of it, it's probably not fair use. If you're not making money off of it, it probably is fair use. It's more complicated than that. But if you follow that test, that's going to cover you through most of the majority of cases. And you guys, if you run into an edge case, hire a lawyer. Book reviews are generally considered fair use. Movie, when you see, I'm old enough to remember Siskel and Ebert, they would show clips of movies. That's considered fair use because it's very, very limited portions, and you're not doing it to basically make yourself money. You're doing it to promote the work. I put video games and hacks and remix. This is something that's relevant to me because I enjoy this, where people will take older games from the 80s and 90s and take the materials in there and turn it into a different game. Nintendo, again, they have great lawyers. Generally, if you don't try to make money off of it, they don't get too worked up about it. The minute you try to make a penny off of it, their lawyers send you a very nasty letter, cease and desist. And again, these are people that will fight you until the earth freezes over and then fight you on the ice. So the long and short of it is, don't try to make money off somebody else's work, and you're probably going to be fine. So we talked a little about remedies for copyrights and if your copyright issues are violated. Are they worth it? You have both the financial issues. Again, lawyers are not cheap. Federal cases are not cheap. There's also, who exactly are you going after, and is this a fight you want to pick? So these are all things you have to take into consideration. Are you going to get your money back? I talk damages. Again, I'll try to explain these terms a little. Actual damages are money is what you actually lost. So if you were going to be able to sell a photo for a certain amount and then it was stolen from you, that's actual damage. Statutory, like we talked about, it's written in the statute as to how much you can get. The other grounds on which you can claim damages are, okay, somebody else took my photo and sold it for $100,000. Therefore, my damages are $100,000. Again, we talked about statutory. The range on what you can get is as low as $750, as high as $30,000. It's at the discretion of the court. He can lower depending on what exactly was taken and the nature of the behavior. The long and short of this is that unless either something very valuable is stolen or a high quantity of photos is stolen, a lawsuit is probably not going to be your best bet. So what can you do? Well, the best thing you can do is protect yourself ahead of time. So that you don't have to go through the trouble of a lawsuit where you might win, but you might end up, spending more money than you make. You can put watermarks on your photos. Now, I'm aware that, I'm not very Photoshop proficient, but I'm aware that people who are good at Photoshop can remove watermarks. If they do that, that is an element that the judge can consider in a lawsuit, and that shows intent. And that pushes your damages up, because it's no longer an accident if you go to that trouble of removing a watermark. Your watermark is going to scare away 80% of people who might think of trying to pass your photo off, because they're not going to want to go through the trouble of or have the ability to remove that. Another one you can do, I know, one is, obviously don't put things on Facebook. There are photo sites that prevent right clicking. Those are ones you can use as well. So that way you can display your photo, but it's not easy to just take that photo and save it and pass it off as their own. I have here express written consent. For those of us who are baseball fans, in the seventh inning, they always have, this is presented with the express written consent of baseball, That clause is probably not enforceable if baseball ever tried to sue on it. If you read it in the strictest terms possible, it would prevent people from even talking about baseball. Now, that might be the goal of Rob Manfred. I don't think very highly of him as a commissioner, but it's unlikely they really meant it to be interpreted that strictly. The point is, it scares most people away. So you're not going, even by posting that, you're going to keep a lot of people from trying to, post that game on your doing that, stealing that photo. So if you put on here, look, you cannot display this without my express written consent. Even if that clause in and of itself isn't enforceable, most people aren't going to know that. They're going to see it, think, okay, I shouldn't mess with this guy. He's obviously spoken to a lawyer, and leave you alone and leave your photos alone. Because that's what you want to do. You want to keep this out of courts, and you want to dissuade people from taking your photographs. So that's kind of it on copyright stuff. The next thing I talk about is contracts. I know a lot of people will take photographs for other people. They'll sell photographs, things like that. So it does dovetail with copyright law, because you can what exactly you're transferring is up for up for debate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about contracts. And this is something that I'm more familiar with because I've done more of this. Most of your contract stuff will be in state court, so that's a benefit to you, that most lawyers can help you with this. There are some situations where it would cross federal, you would go into federal court, but we can discuss that. A contract is the legal there's an offer, there's acceptance and consideration. Basically, a contract is two people agree to something for a specific term. Can it be oral or written? We've all heard the famous saying, oral contract is worth the paper it's printed on. Well, that's not totally true. Oral contracts do exist. Courts prefer written ones, because when it's written, there's no disputes over the terms. We all agree to it. You got this piece of paper. When it's oral, when it's verbal, there can be some dispute. And just as an aside, the statute of limitations to bring a breach of contract claim on an oral contract is 2 years. Written contract, it's 5 years. So that's another reason to reduce everything to writing instead of just handshake agreements. Does it have to be signed and notarized and witnessed by multiple people in a law firm? No, it doesn't. You don't need that. These are good things. The reason you do it is because there's less chance of the contract being dismissed as either invalid or unfair. But if you and another individual on a napkin write up an agreement, that is just as enforceable as if I put it on fancy red line paper in our office and have 3 people sign it and notarize it. If you should ask a lawyer to review a contract, especially if you're dealing with a company or a business that has more experience with contracts than you do. We kind of see the tricks and traps of things, and we may be able to help you avoid issues. We can also clear up misunderstandings so that you're less likely to end up in court. In Virginia, I think most places, but I know I can only say for Virginia because that's where I practice. Judges are almost always going to enforce the terms of the contract. Basically, the only times they're going to not enforce it is if it was done under duress, meaning a gun was put to your head, or the terms are so unfair they shock the conscience of the court, which is a very high bar. So if you agree to a contract, and then you don't like it afterwards, you're probably out of luck. So make sure before you sign something, you're okay with it. What can you contract to do or contract away? Basically, you can contract anything. That deal can be whatever you guys decide. And as I mentioned, the courts will go with it. Most of your claims are going to be in your state courthouses that I talked about in every city and county. So let's say you make a contract where you allow somebody to use your photos for something. Does that mean that you have transferred copyright? Well, not necessarily. The agreement itself would need to specify it. And I think if the agreement doesn't specify that you are transferring ownership and the copyright, the court's not going to infer that. If it's just using photos for a contest or for a display or a presentation. How much should you get paid for the photo? Whatever the other person is willing to pay you. Always take the money. Always take as much money as you can. Never feel bad about it. It's their problem if they give you too much. I'm greedy. So if you do somebody a favor, they will never repay you. The next question is, are you waiving your ownership rights? And when I did this, it was kind of in the discussion of photo contests. A lot of contests where you have to submit photos or samples of things will have a clause where you waive your ownership rights to this. So when you do that, be careful. There was years ago, about 20 years ago, a band was having a contest they were looking for a replacement drummer or a replacement guitarist. And the people, when they showed up, they were told you can't use anything that's already been done. You have to have your own guitar samples. And oh, by the way, anything you perform for us, you're giving to us. We now own the rights for it, so we can use it, and you can't get compensated. So it went over extremely well, and then they ended up hiring another professional who wasn't even part of the contest. It was exceptionally well received. So when you enter a photo contest, look exactly at what's happening with your photo, and if the terms of this are not something that you're okay with, you might not want to enter that photo in if it looks like you're going to be giving that photo away for the rest of your life. The summary, basically, you own your photos until you decide you don't. So until you sign that contract, giving somebody else those the copyrights, or you agree that somebody else can have it, that is your photo. Posting it on Facebook does not change that. Posting it, putting a picture up, you still own it. Somebody else takes another picture of it, doesn't mean that they now have the copyright. Generally, going to court isn't going to be your best bet. If you're going to court, you either need to have a lot of photos, or it needs to be a photo that you could have sold for a lot of money. Your best thing you can do is protect yourself, to make it hard for your photos to be taken by somebody else, especially photos that you think are valuable. And if you think it's a valuable photo, maybe don't share it on Facebook if you think you're going to sell it later down the road. If you're doing contracts, make those contracts as specific as possible about future ownership. I don't have to tell you guys, in the old days, it would just be easy. Who owns the negatives? That's who owns the photo. Now that we no longer have film, you can't necessarily say that. I think it's who owns the flash drive, where the photos are on. So be specific, and don't be afraid to ask a professional, to ask somebody who specializes in this for help. They can review your document and just kind of tell you what you're looking at, and if this is a good idea or if you need to say something else. So that's the end of my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
Questions, anybody? MJ?
Sorry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. In the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about the difference between copyright and patents.
Yes.
Intellectual property, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It occurs, the definition of intellectual property is something that you created, right?
Yeah.
The definition. So what's the difference between that and writing that's handled by copyright?
So they do overlap a bit. The physical book is the copyright. Characters in that book are intellectual property.
Right.
I think that's probably you do get, like I said, these terms do overlap, and there are some similarities where they can actually fall into both buckets. So, for example, the Harry Potter, the books are copyrighted, but the concept, the Hogwarts and all of that, that's J.K. Rowling's intellectual property.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Easy to understand, a very complex.
Sure.
I'd just like to emphasize something that you did say about contests. What I've seen many times is not that they will claim to, take your copyright. They leave the copyright with you, but then they take all other rights they could use it on T-shirts or advertising or anything else, make $1 bazillion on it and not pay you a penny. We had something that's usually buried deep in the terms of use in very small print. Just want, I always look for it. I never enter any contest that has anything like that. It's just a matter of, personal, I guess, but just wanted to emphasize that to my friends.
Absolutely. And that's, again, it comes down to your comfort level with, is this a photo that I'm okay with entering into this contest? And it may, and because especially a lot of places don't negotiate. So it's their terms, take it or leave it. You have to just kind of decide, is this something you want to do?
Yeah, the question I have is if somebody takes a photograph that you've done and then they take it into Photoshop and heavily edit it.
Sure.
What point is it their intellectual property? How does that work when they make it into something very different?
Yeah. If you replace all the parts of the ship of Theseus, does it stay the ship of Theseus? So that you actually get into a fair use question. So that's a little more complicated. The short answer is you probably still have an argument that they have violated your copyright by taking something that is yours, and then they're going to turn around and say, well, I only used a small portion of it. I transformed it. That's a court question that's going to come down to, how much of your photo was used by this other person. My feeling is that he's violating your copyright. So it's funny where you see that, honestly, where you see that come up more, you see it in photos some, where you mostly see it is music, which is whole nother topic, but the most famous example was My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. He was sued because he used She's So Fine by the Chiffons, and the Chiffons actually won in court, and they ended up getting like $1 million in damages. And basically the experts who listened to it said, there's no way that George could have come up with this on his own without hearing She's So Fine. And the bass line, the line running through the songs are the same, to where if you listen to one, you recognize it. So you see that come up more in music than in photos, but it does come up in photos, and that's going to be a factual question for courts.
Yeah, because I guess that issue came up with Andy Warhol when he took
Yes.
photos of Marilyn Monroe and manipulated it into something that it was his own.
Yeah, and it's again, it comes down to an argument of fair use, and because like I told you, it's a 4-pronged test. So it comes down to, you know, how much are you using more of it than you need, as much of it the original work as you need to for your work. So, and a lot of times these are resolved by the second person writing a check to the first person and everybody being happy. That's what happens a lot in music. Money gets exchanged. You know, there have been some recent examples of that. So I think Sam Smith was sued by Tom Petty for a song because Sam Smith copied I Won't Back Down. Sam Smith wrote Tom Petty a check. Tom Petty said, thank you very much, no hard feelings. So that's how those are usually resolved. They don't by all parties and everyone goes home happy.
This is Sue. Can you hear me? This is Sue. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Rocco. First of all, thank you very much for joining our presentation, for being our presenter. We're really enjoying this. I have 2 questions.
Sure.
When you talk about contracts, should the photographer have an LLC, or is this just, you know, Joe Schmo, I'm going to take your picture for your birthday party or whatever?
Sure.
Would you
So,
advise that photographer to have an LLC?
Well, I recommend an LLC because I do a lot of corporation registries and I can charge you $200 to set that up for you as your agent. But yeah, in general, what an LLC does, there are a couple things one of the big things it does is that if you get sued, the corporation is sued, not you. So it protects your personal assets. So what I would say is if this is something you're doing regularly, you want a business. If it's something you're doing one time for a friend, you probably don't need to go through the trouble of setting up a business. But it is not, if you regularly do, you know, wedding photographs or birthday party photographs, it's not a bad idea to spend a couple $100 on setting and $100 a year in registration fees to set up an LLC, just so that you've got those protections in place.
Great. And also my follow-up question is unrelated. It regards street photography. I know many public events are now saying on their website and their materials that if you attend, you have given your permission to have your photograph taken. But if I'm just out walking on Carey Street and I'm very intimidated to just like take pictures of strangers. Do you have a thought on that? How does that work?
So there's actually a couple of different issues. You can take the picture. However, if you start marketing photos of other people, you run into name, image, and likeness rules, which for those of if you follow college football, you know, this is a whole big thing where basically you can market yourself. And I don't know if a public organization can give away the rights of people who have no idea that their rights are being given away. So now maybe I'm wrong on that. And, you know, courts have said, oh yeah, they can say this, but I feel like if I'm just randomly walking down Carey Street and I have no idea that there's something going on, I don't know exactly how I've consented to let somebody else take my photo and sell it. So you can take my photo. I'm in the public. I can't do anything about that. But if you make money off of my photo, I think I've got rights. So that's kind of a different issue.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. That's an interesting question. I wonder about, for example, in 2020, when all the riots and disturbances were going on and people were taking pictures of police officers and other public officials, does that still apply to them? I mean, because you know darn well that some of those people are probably amateur photographers like we are, and some of them probably did get paid for those images. So,
well, yeah. I mean, there are things are a little different with public figures. I don't necessarily think a police officer in a small town would count as a public figure. He would obviously in that area, but under the definition of public figure, I don't know if he would. My guess is that the officers or people whose photos were sold for money don't know that their photos were sold for money. So, you know, obviously there is something there, some issues there. But in general, I mean, when you're out in public, you can take photos. It's just, you have to be careful when you're taking photos of other people. You know, that can get thorny.
I have one other quick question for you.
Sure.
On the fair use issue.
Yeah.
If we do a PowerPoint presentation that incorporates pictures, for example, I teach at VCU and I do a lot of PowerPoint. Is that considered fair use? I'm getting paid by VCU to teach,
sure,
obviously, but that slide presentation is part of that, maybe part of a lecture.
Yeah.
Or...
In general, if it's being done for teaching purposes, fair use applies. So again, that's not 100%. You may want to check with VCU's lawyer on that. They would probably appreciate it if you gave a heads up before getting them sued. But what fair use comes down to is, are you using? It just boils down to, are you using somebody else's work to make money? And if you're not, you're probably going to have a good claim. In your case, you're not doing it. You're doing it more, what you're doing it is closer to a book review than it is for a commercial purpose.
Thank you.
No problem.
So if I'm following, I don't need a subject's permission to take their picture if I don't profit from it by any amount. If I'm not going to sell it or use it in business, I take your picture and I don't need your permission for that if I don't market it or sell it. But can I display it and still own the, I would still own the copyright to it, but is there any restriction on displaying that picture, whether if I don't have a written permission for it?
There's no restriction on displaying it. I mean, like I said, you can take photos of public, and you know, if you don't want your photo taken, don't go out in public. So you can still display those. But again, if you start selling them, and that individual finds out, he may want to cut. So you can still do that.
Anybody else? Well, I have a question. What if you've taken photographs? Well, here's an example. I've taken photographs of my church for the church's website. And then when I do a Google search, I find some of those photographs. I've never been contacted. They simply lifted them from our website. Is it worth doing anything about?
So what you should probably do is contact the person who took them and say, you have taken this without my permission. You can threaten to take them to court. Now, is it worth it to you? Probably not, but you can threaten them for it. And more than likely they will back down. You have a lawyer send a cease and desist letter. So that's kind of your best bet on that.
But in general, it's not worth it.
Well, in general, yeah, in general, you're just gonna run into the barrier of damages when you go to court. So you always when push comes to shove, if you're taking them to court, the judge is gonna say, well, what have you actually lost, sir? And you're gonna say, well, nothing. And that's going to be a huge problem for you. But you can say, look, this belongs to me. You have taken this without my permission. Please remove this. Especially if they're posting it on another server, You get into strikes and copyright violations. And that's something where the individual the providers can get in trouble. YouTube is notorious for something is copyrighted. If there's a song that's copyrighted, they put a strike on it. You can't play it, or they'll mute out the pictures. So that's an option you have to try and get them to remove these photos.
Here's another question about public versus private. I know you can take pictures in public of just about anything.
Sure.
But what about something like the VMFA? Is that considered public building if you're inside and you take pictures of people inside the building?
Inside the building, there's probably going to be some privacy issues.
Okay.
So outside is fine. Anything in what's called curtilage, which is I'm kind of getting into criminal stuff because that's my background, but Fourth Amendment covers privacy or search and seizure stuff. And anything else that I can see in the outside, there really isn't any sort of privacy protections. Once you start going inside a building, I think that's where the courts might say you really shouldn't be doing this without permission.
Permission of the individual or permission of the institution?
Both. I think the institution would need to give you permission to take pictures inside. And then, if you're taking pictures of photos inside there, I mean, again, you might want to say, hey, can I use this photo of you? Because depending on where you are, there may be a presumption of privacy in that building, and they may not, want that. I mean, if you're at a courthouse, it's one thing. If you're at a doctor's office, it's a different thing. So that's like, I mean, if you've ever, some museums, you can't take photos inside the museums, and that's their rule. So,
but you should know ahead of time.
Yes.
I think it's also a public, VMFA is a state-run institution.
And it's open to the public with no admission.
Right. Well, and they may be,
We're taking some, even short, I think if you go at the Shorefront Mall, I think there are some signs around, they're like buried in corners where they say, no photography allowed.
Yeah.
But I've actually been stopped by, by one of the guards, and asked not to take pictures. And I think that is private property.
That's private property.
And so, yeah, you have to abide by their. Yeah.
When we were at the FMA, I actually asked about photography, and of course they said, well, you can take photos, no flash, but don't try not to take pictures of the other patrons.
Okay.
But anything that's displayed, you can take pictures. They specifically asked that I not take pictures of the other patrons. Now legally, I don't know.
Yeah,
how that's just,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
You gotta wonder when they have security video filming you all the time and then say you can't take pictures of other people.
I know.
Yeah.
What's your point?
Yeah.
Quick question. A follow-up question.
Sure.
Regarding the, getting permission. Is it advisable? And I know some people had said it was advisable, but what do you think about us carrying around like one of those copyright apps when may I take your picture, Mr. Columbus, and then you get permission, I could put your name and that kind of stuff, or one of those copyright apps?
If this is something you do regularly, and you have a commercial business, it is not a bad idea to do that. Now, I think if let's say you just say, hey, I'm taking a picture of you, sign this, depending on what exactly it says, that may or may not completely protect you in court. But it's at least something. And it's at least, you then can argue, you presented this to me, I had an opportunity to acknowledge the risks and rewards of what I was doing, and I signed it, and therefore I can't turn around and be upset later. And a judge may agree with you.
I have another question. The University of Richmond in the past has always been pretty lax. You can go on campus and take pictures. Just recently, they've decided, however, that if you take pictures of students and the faces are recognizable, you have to get a release form signed by that student. Which of course makes it very difficult, unless it's an athletic event, because then that's an exception. But now they're wrestling with the notion of maybe changing it so that every student who comes in has to sign a form that gives permission to have their photographs taken.
And 5 more lawyers get to work.
And 5 more.
But are they giving permission to the university to take the picture? Or are they just giving permission for anybody to come on campus to take it? I think that's
what the lawyers are trying to figure out.
I mean, it would depend on what exactly, I mean, I hate to use the lawyer phrase if it depends, but it depends on what the release is saying. And that's something I would be interested in is, who am I granting permission to? Am I granting permission to the university in this release? And it needs to clear that out. Or am I granting permission to anybody? And that I would be a lot more hesitant to do. Now, Richmond, you know, I went to Richmond for law school, and when my dad and I visited the place, my dad's remark was they wallpaper this place with money. So the students there, I mean, there's more BMWs in the student lot than the teacher lot. I'm sure that these kids their parents have great legal counsel, and that's driving a lot of what Richmond's doing. But I think, you know, I would, as a student, I want to know who exactly I'm giving permission for. And, you know, that document would have to, you know, would go a long way towards all that.
Yeah, okay. Well, the forms they're developing are a little confusing at the time, because, you know, the photographer has to sign at the bottom, but if the student giving the right to that individual photographer, but at the paragraph on the top says the University of Richmond can use your photographs any way it wants. So does that mean I take photographs, I'm sort of acting as an agent of the university?
That's what it sounds like in that agreement, that the right is with the school, and then the school is contracting with you and making you an agent. So your rights flow through Richmond. Whatever rights Richmond has for that limited purpose, you would have them.
Okay. Any more questions? Now that we're all confused?
This is why I say you need to talk to copyright lawyers before doing anything. But contracts are not as complicated in that, but you have to sit down and look at the contract. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Great.
Sure.
My friend here found a bunch of pictures in the trash can.
Yeah.
And they're great pictures, man.
Yeah.
He can publish them in a magazine and make some money, can he?
So if they were in a trash can, I think you would have a very strong argument that those photos were abandoned.
But those are only the prints, not negatives.
Can you say it again?
Those were the prints, not the negatives. Somebody else.
That's true. That is true. However, I think you would still have that argument. I mean, it could be that, you know, the original owner says, no, I just didn't like those specific photos, and that's why I was getting rid of them. I think you would have a pretty good argument that whoever took those photos was no longer interested in them if they were disposed in such a manner.
Okay.
And
Anybody
if
else?
the person with the negatives contacts you, then you can discuss your options later.
Anybody
I
else?
don't have anything more.
No, I don't think we have anything. If there's nothing else, thank you, Rob.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. Well, those of us who go out on the street always operate on the assumption that if you are in public, you can take pictures. That it's fair game. But if, yeah, Ed.
Yeah, I'm talking about street photography. It has been my belief, based upon what I've heard from a number of different lawyers, that, you know, with respect to street photography, you have the right, if somebody's in a public place,
Right.
to take the picture. Now, the question becomes, what use can you make of that image? And it's been my belief, well, based upon what I've heard, is that if you're using it for artistic purposes, for example, printing it, showing it in galleries, selling it, or even creating books, art books with it, that's okay. But you can't license that or use it to sell product that's good for commercial use. That's the assumption or the belief that I'm working under.
But you
I'm not a
sued
lawyer.
you?
I'm not, you know, I'm not.
When you say a product, you mean a framed print?
Sorry?
When you say a product, would a framed print that you're selling, would that be included with that?
My belief is no.
If you took a photograph of a young woman on the street with a radiant smile, and then you sold that to Pepsodent for $2,500, you better have a release.
Yeah.
Or else, if you just want to show that picture here as a great street shot, that's no problem.
Or if you want to print it and put it in, you know, and, you know, sell it to the Louvre, you know, $4 million, you know, hang next to Mona Lisa, that would be okay. I think.
I don't know about that, because you're making money off it.
I know that when I say
Tom,
I know. I don't think I have to worry about that. You know, when I do photography at Louis Cantor, I don't take people pictures. If I do, it's so that they're not recognizable.
Yeah.
And they're really, because I give them my photographs to use.
Right.
And I say, if I have people photos, I should have an agreement that they agree to have their photos taken.
Yeah.
Because the guards may be putting them, you know, on their Facebook page or whatever.
yeah, they'll be using in commercial.
Yeah.
They'll be using it commercially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, you know, what I said is my belief based upon what I heard other lawyers, so most of whom are really copyright, you know, are copyright intellectual property lawyers say. I'm not pontificating that that is absolutely the only interpretation.
And it's also not absolute. I have taken photographs from a public street out at the airport.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take too long before a security car comes up and wants to know what I'm doing.
Right.
Are you, so I may be in public and maybe the airport is public, but it's in a slightly different category. The security people get worried about somebody aiming a big lens at the airport. Right. So it's a little bit.
What they're investigating is, you know, whether you have some, you know, some sinister, you know, or doing something sinister. You carry a camera, but is that camera a disguise for a weapon?
Right. Well, this is where gray hair comes to your advantage.
Yeah.
Because then they think just some old guy taking pictures.
Especially somebody like you, Peter. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Paul.
I've heard these discussions among photographers. I've been around photographers. And I've had a couple situations where, you know, somebody's used my picture and something to it, manipulate it or whatever, and I just, you know, okay, take it down. All right, we'll take it down. I'm wondering if anyone has had actual experiences around this area that where you get sideways financially with anything. Where, I mean, we give each other advice a lot to protect ourselves. And has anyone gotten in a sticky spot where, hey, you're making money off my picture, I want some, or I'm accused of improperly using somebody's image in my photo? Have we all been protecting ourselves and has anybody had any problems?
No.
I just think, you know, I've seen, I have a service, I forget what it's called. And what they do is they search the internet. And they've popped up with my photo being someplace in India or whatever, you know, it's just not, obviously not worth it. I've never been in that situation with anybody relatively locally, meaning anywhere in the United States. But I think one of the things that Rocco said was lawsuits are expensive. And that's absolutely true. Once you get lawyers involved, probably the only people who are going to profit from it are the lawyers. Unless you have a very, very high profile case like the Andy Warhol case that Tom mentioned. I read recently about another one where a woman took this iconic street photo, and then somebody else actually took a very, very similar photo. And, people dressed up similarly in front of the same store. And she's now suing that other person, I guess for copyright infringement, because he replicated, not a photo exactly, but the whole look and feel of it.
I guess I've never known anyone personally, or me myself, had a picture that I thought was that valuable that somebody could substantially profit from it. I mean, I know that we talk about cases that happen naturally, and I'm just kind of wondering if I know anybody who has really had some actual and direct damages because of somebody acting badly in this way.
Yeah.
I guess I'd be flattered if someone stole one of my pictures.
I've had some stolen out of a tavern already, and I thought, guy, right, don't fire the kid, just.
It makes you feel good.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I think that, there could be a problem. I guess my fear would be that, like, if you took a photo, you do a lot of concert photos, band photos. If somebody took one of your photos and started selling it or licensing it to, other entities, and everybody's making a profit over it, but it was originally your photo, how do you get mixed up in that?
I guess I would first have to take one that was that good.
I guess that was kind of like, I don't know the answer. But could the people who you took a photo of sue you because somebody else is using your photo? Somehow you get, it's crazy.
I just had another example, like I wrote about it in the last thing, where a young woman, a musician in Richmond, just died of cancer. She was about 30, and everybody really liked her. And I had some pictures of her that I given to her and to her band, and other people had used them. And then over the last couple of weeks, they're popping up, my pictures, in people's tributes for her. Now, are they allowed to do that? I hope so.
Yeah.
They're
allowed to do that if you allow them to do that, or if they're not profiting by it. If they're just, if they're running a tribute to her on Facebook or wherever, and they're not selling it, whether they have a legal right to it or not, just, hey, do it. As long as they're not somehow selling that photo or licensing that photo for publication, somebody and making a profit over it.
Well, I think in a way this leads into what I suggested earlier about, at our next meeting, photographs you wonder if you should have taken. We've all got shots that, maybe in hindsight we say, was that too much invasion of privacy, or was that okay, or should I have gotten permission? But I'd like to see some examples and have some discussion about how far you go. I have a shot that we took in London, and it was a woman cross-legged sitting on the pavement, and she had chained herself to the front gate of Buckingham Palace. And there were 3 Metropolitan Police officers standing there looking at her. And, I really like the shot. She's framed by the officers, and it says, okay, here's a protester. Did I invade her privacy? She was in public. She was protesting in public. It was like a news photograph, but I mean, how far do you go? How far can you go?
I'm quite sure that the report that they would pay them for it.
No,
They would put it in the newspaper.
it would have been used as a news shot.
Yeah.
Right. So in that sense, it was okay, and I didn't try to sell it. I just took it as an interesting photograph.
You see these, things where paparazzi take a picture of somebody like Kim Kardashian, and she reposts it on her Facebook page or starts using it. And the photographer sues her for using the photograph because it's his copyright, even though it's a picture of her. And I don't remember who it was, but in the last few months, I've seen 2 or 3 cases of where paparazzi type photographers have sued celebrities because they were reusing their photograph.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a lawyer's dream, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Sue Kardashian, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, well, was she standing in public? Or was she?
Yeah, they were in the public.
Yeah, but the paparazzi clearly making money off her image.
Right.
There was a case, where some photographer was taking pictures of the Marlboro ads and using them, changing them slightly. And I think the company sued him, and they lost because those pictures were on display on board.
We haven't even begun to talk about the artificial intelligence.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a whole other can of worms, Bruce.
And Jay, you have something?
I have an observation follow up to what Roger was talking about. People like Kim Kardashian, I believe, could be classified as public figures. And so they have a different expectation of privacy than me, if I'm walking around and somebody takes a photo and makes money out of it.
I think that's right. I mean, she's clearly marketer herself, a public figure. I would think much more fair game.
That would be the reason why people are, the photographer is in turn suing her for using his photo because he can legally take it.
He can legally take it and she's making money out of his pocket.
Yes. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but that's just occurred to me that might be the issue.
I think that's a good point. What we've been talking about here for the most part is common sense.
Yeah.
And there are things in place. I know, pictures of mine have been published and, they would not even consider publishing unless I could provide the model base. Yeah, it's so there's the protection for them and for us, and really then think about it. Right. So, yeah, there'll be situations, but like the man said, it costs a good chunk of change to sue somebody. So.
Well, a lot of it is common sense. If you're in the city and there's a young woman sitting eating her lunch, and she's got her legs crossed her skirt and halfway up the thigh, you're probably in trouble if you try to do anything with that. She could really.
You might be, but I wouldn't. Yeah, they go back to what you were talking about. What are you comfortable shooting? Okay, now a woman who's chained to the fence and the cops are about to rip her arms off. To me, that's happening and it's public and take the picture. Yeah. Okay, and I don't have a problem with that, but I know people do or would.
Yeah, that's right. We have a photographer in this group who will not take pictures of people, no matter what. Right?
Why are you looking at me, Peter?
So she doesn't have to worry at all.
But in your situation, I think that lady was probably, that's what she was wanting. Was someone to take that picture. She was there for that purpose.
When another woman got walking in the city, I looked down the alley. And there was a homeless woman lying in the alley. That's different. With a garbage pail beside her. And trash piled up, and she was, clearly homeless. Well, it was an interesting shot. But should I have?
That's a different, whole different aspect.
No, you couldn't see her face. She had her legs, she was facing away from me. So all you saw basically was her legs and her jeans. You had no idea who. Great picture. Great picture? Great picture, yeah. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I don't see why that should be a problem, because they can't say, oh, there's Stacy Lane.
And if you could identify her, have her face, it would have been totally different.
It still would have been a great picture. Well, yeah, you got some of those too, but clearly where the face is identifiable, it's an invasion, even though this person is standing in the street. It's an invasion, probably an invasion of privacy. To show this homeless guy rummaging around in the trash, and you can see his face. Anyway, that's, so if you've got shots that raise questions like this, let's.
One comment, I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, Peter, just a comment about what you said about students at U of R. I hope that gets revised, because otherwise then students can take pictures of other students at anywhere at any time, and which could be totally inappropriate. So I hope, that doesn't come to fruition at a lot of these campuses where the students, virtually upon admission say, hey, you could take my picture. So that's my comment on that, on campus wide pictures.
Well, a lot of it is, common sense. If you're taking a picture of somebody, you're just going to embarrass. Why who? But if they're clearly on some home, isn't that their responsibility? It's not mine. Well, okay. And I take a picture of it. You're looking like a jackass. I don't care. Okay. That's it. And when I was at the Pride Festival last fall, dozens of pictures of people dressed up in various pride outfits. Everybody was happy. Nobody said no. But it's a public event and they're in a public area, but still, presumably some of them may be a little hesitant about a photograph of them being gay. Maybe. Although why would they come to a pride festival and wear a t-shirt? So that's a little different.
I think someone mentioned earlier even that anywhere you go, there's a camera. There's a camera right there taking our picture. I mean, that's
yeah, especially if you're in England, you're on CCTV on. No matter where you go.
One thing I just want to comment on, we talk about a lot of different situations where it could be a problem, might not be a problem. Someone's got my picture or whatever. But you're not going to assume it was expensive. Well, call them up or write to them and say, hey, cut it out. And then I've only had a couple instances where there was a problem with somebody used my pictures the wrong way, and that resolved it. I don't have to, our presentation was from a lawyer, but geez, if somebody says, hey, I don't like what you do with my picture, would you please stop? Which of us aren't going to do that?
Yeah. Anyway, so that is a beautiful segue into the next meeting, which is, as I said, you've got something that you think is on the fence. We'd love to see it, we'd love to have you talk about it, because we've all taken shots with it, so. Especially you.
picture of it.
Okay, that's it for today, folks.
Yeah, two things. Number one, Ann Sandwich was on.
Oh,
She's gone now, I think. But she was on for a few minutes or something to the time on I guess she's on the system. Zoom. Yeah, Zoom, yeah, your thing. And the other thing, did you get, do we have the?
I think I have it.
You have it, okay. You have that then.
Okay, thank you.
One more thing, Peter.
Tom.
The weekend of the 25th, out at Lewis Ginter is the Virginia Daffodil Society show. And the following weekend is the African Violence show. And then on the 14th of the month of April, the
Oh,
But remember, 25th also Galaxy Convention.
That's right. We gotta go see the uniform.
See the, maybe you're talking. Get, make sure you can, it, so you can put it in the paper there.